Good. Okay, council, it's 6:30 and we'll go ahead and start this work session for March 20th, 2024.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. I'll give a little bit of a background to what led up to this, and then obviously Harry will do a lot of the talking. Just from a historical perspective, even before I came almost 11 years ago, the cities had the sidewalk concrete replacement program. And it's a program where property owners who wish to replace a portion of their sidewalk can do so. They can call, they would sign up. Half of it would be paid by the property owner and half would be paid by the city. As we move forward with the street sales tax, and we had the citizen appointed committee by city council, one of the discussions that came up around the concrete program was if there are some inherent equity issues involved from the perspective of those properties who can or who feel like they can afford to repair their sidewalk are more likely to take advantage of it versus properties that may need repairs to the sidewalk but don't feel like they can repair it. And so there was additional money that was put in, and it was also kind of this first time from a council perspective that I think we started thinking about the philosophy of the concrete sidewalk program and if it was functioning the way we really needed it to. A little bit after that point in time, I'm not sure if it was some information we received from CML or if we had an individual actually trip, and that this question of liability came up. And as we were processing on that, what is clear is maintaining the sidewalks is the responsibility of the property owner. It is city infrastructure, it is on an easement, but it is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain it. And that is similar to any other community in the United States. That's not something that's unique to us. But at the same time, if the city does not have some sort of program to maintain the sidewalks, then if there is an accident because there's a trip hazard and it's something we should have known about, then there can be the possibility of a liability situation. Now, there's not a strict structure on what a program has to look like. So for example, when we were talking to council, it could look like something where we identify where the trip hazards are and we send notifications to the property owner that they have to repair the sidewalk. So as long as, from that program perspective, as long as we are aware of where they are and we're requiring property owners to fix them, that satisfies the legal situation from a liability perspective. There's other options out there as well, and that's kind of what we wanted to talk to you tonight. Following, though, some of that legal consideration, we did do notifications to property owners last year on some of the trip hazards. And at that point, it was to encourage them to participate in the sidewalk program. So they have to fix it. And instead of fixing the full cost, they could get half of it paid if they signed up for this program. So that's kind of the path we were heading down. But as we geared up for this year, I think Harry was really wanting to think maybe a little bit more outside the box. And so, Harry, let me turn it over to you now.
Yes, I know. I think what Ms. Brooks said was really accurate. We lost kind of last year. So back in 2022, we did do the survey. Beata went through and walked the whole city, identified all the tripping hazards. Gearing up into that fall, that's when we started sending out the notifications. And unfortunately, the contractor who was doing the bulk of the work for us, passed away, Mr. Jake Medina. And so we weren't able to capture kind of the notices that we sent out in late 2022. Last year, we put it out to bid, and we didn't have any interest. It just doesn't fit the model for most concrete companies. So that's when we brought to council the idea of doing it in-house. And fortunate enough, that's worked out. We were able to hire a gentleman who has a lot of experience. He did his first pour today actually on Main Street there at the alleyway. And so trying to figure out how do we utilize the program the best and minimize the city's risk and liability. So we wanted to go back and start looking at all these trip hazards and gearing up to how do we tackle this beast? I mean, if you look at it, there's 393 identified trip hazards or basically deteriorated sidewalks throughout the city. And this was again 2 years ago. So I'm assuming that has increased since then. How do we tackle this elephant? We can only do so much from a labor perspective. There's only so much of a season that we can actually reasonably go in and work. So we kind of broke it up into quadrants. And if you kind of look at the map, you know, and on the legend at the bottom, basically the orange and the red, the higher the density as far as the amount of trip hazards or deteriorated sidewalk there is. And it's pretty consistent with kind of the old growth areas where we got the big cottonwood trees and you can see it kind of go up into La Vida in that area. Those kind of are the areas that we really want to focus on primarily first in a sense, but how do we break that up? So we kind of started looking at how much can we do in 1 year, and sitting down with street manager Ray and the concrete guy, we said, what's reasonable? What can we tackle within say a year, a month, and a week, and a day at a time? So we kind of came up with a formula of how much we think we can tackle, and it's pretty conservative, but in doing that, and the work we have laid out ahead of us, we figured at least take 5 to 7 years just to go through the city and tackle at least some of these. And if you look at kind of the southwestern quadrant of the city, you don't see anything because most of those are missing. They don't have sidewalks at all. So priority 1 is let's fix what we have. And then priority 2 is maybe some infill, but do we want to neglect the whole program and say, we're not going to do any others or take any other applications because we can only do so much work? So kind of had a thought of what is reasonable. Should we use the street fund, tax fund to maybe offset that cost for property owners? It's not a big cost. If you look at the average repair, I think we estimated it only as 150 because now they're not paying for labor. They're just paying for the raw concrete being placed or half of it. It's not that big of a burden, but it's the burden of trying to get people signed up and moving forward with it. It takes a lot of staff time. So my idea to Heather was, you know, we can present to council to keep it as is, and we'll be as aggressive as we can trying to get as many of these hazards fixed. And where do we start? Do we just start on one side of the city and work our way through, or those that we can get to sign up for the program? But I was thinking, well, since we're the citizens and, you know, travelers, everybody is paying into this tax fund, should the city just take the initiative to take that funding and go in and just start replacing at least their liability and the risk? And if homeowners want to expand off of that and replace more, if we have the time, we could fix, you know, maybe their whole front yard. Or timing wise, I think we're focused on just trying to get the liability risk taken care of, but really wanted to bring it to council and say, is this the program that you want to keep moving forward with, or do you want to alter it and maybe use the funding in a different way to kind of be successful in fixing some of the risks?
And so if I could kind of word it in a slightly different way, if we weren't to come back to you, the last direction council gave us is send nice letters informing property owners that they're in violation, they need to fix, but here's an option to get half of it covered type of situation. So that's the last direction we could head in. But as Harry points out, some are going to take that letter and file it away, and others might call us and sign up for the program. And so you're going to get kind of this mismatch, and is that the most and highest best use of our resources and those types of things. Conversely, given what the cost is and some of the benefits for us to go into one area and really kind of tackle it, instead of sending the nicely worded letters that are threatening property owners to do something, what if we just send letters saying we're going to be in your area fixing your sidewalk? And so it means it will take 5 to 7 years. They don't have to pay their half of it. It allows us to, you know, go either where the highest traffic is from a liability, to then also go to where the biggest areas are and work our way through. And so it will take us 5 to 7 years to do it. It's a little bit more friendly of an approach type of situation. It will make better use of our resources, because instead of hitting, you know, 20 houses spread out throughout, we can really kind of go into one area type of thing. So is that a good summary as well, Harry?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we wanted to come and answer questions and get your feedback if you'd like to do a slight change in direction.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start off with Counselor Carson and then Counselor Hensley, since they have their lights on. And then Counselor Vehil.
So what happens in the case of an anomaly like me? Because over here on Edison, these little two bubbles that are here are me. I was like the first one she sprayed. And so I was gonna fix it myself. So that's why I hadn't signed up. I just hadn't done it. Like I already have a plan on how to fix it cheapest as possible. Cause I think when I looked at the program, it was gonna cost me like close to $1,000 to fix it. And it's just two pieces on mine. It's like a root from a tree that lifted mine up. So like, what does that do for somebody like me that's not in one of these concentrated areas? Cause like, if I could, as a constituent, could pay $150 and fix it, I would, because I was told by a contractor it would have cost me a lot more. So I'm like, well, I'll just do it on a Saturday, and I just haven't done it. And so, I mean, also as a councilman, I want to set a good example. So I kind of feel like a jerk now because we're trying to jump on this, and I still haven't done mine. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to, like, what does that do for someone where there's only one? Like, I'm the only person there. I mean, I've been there the longest, and so.
So if we don't make any changes, property owners could either do kind of what you were thinking about, which is take care of it on their own type of situation. And as long as that fixed it, everything's good. Or they could have contacted us to sign up for the cost share program and the city does it type of thing. What we're recommending to you tonight is, instead of that being the option, property owners can still fix it if they want, or we'll get to it and pay 100% to do the repair from a city perspective, is what we're saying. Now, it may not be this year, depending on where you are type of situation, but so that we're just changing it. So property owners can still do it themselves. But what we're saying is, do you want it to be the city's only paying half, or do you want it to be where the city will pay all of it?
No, that's not I'm not trying to rush to fix it. My problem is that I have kind of an internal battle because, we've had this conversation before. We had it about the roundabout, and I was super adamant that we weren't going to spend money unless, you know what I mean, from that fund in any other way. We had spoken about that a lot. And so that's my only issue is that conundrum there, because that was one of the reasons it got passed, because we bound our word, you know what I mean, to that, and we created that resolution. So I'm torn here from a personal standpoint. Shoot, I'd love to get it fixed for $150, and not have to do it myself, because it's laborious. You know what I mean? My plan wasn't easy, but I also really don't want to be a hypocrite.
I don't think staff would be recommending anything that would violate the trust and faith set out in the sales tax. Street trust fund.
And I'm not saying that.
So, because, as those discussions were happening, it was already the equity issue and it was already the city paying half. And what came up afterwards is the liability question. So I think using the street sales tax for a sidewalk concrete replacement program to reduce the liability to the city would be consistent to the street sales tax.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Carson. Counselor Hensley, Counselor Vehil, then Counselor Krebs.
So I think it's a great idea. And what I really like about it is, so from a marketing perspective as well, is obviously it's never going to be too soon to start realizing we're going to have to put this up for re-vote because we're going to sunset. And what I think is, obviously, if we go this route, which I totally supportive of, is also do it in a way, whether it's the signage again, like how we have the signs, this street is funded by whatever, maybe if we go into a certain that red area or something, having these sidewalks were funded by, or making sure, letting all those people know when we do theirs that, hey, this was funded because of the tax and saved you $650, or do you know what I'm saying? So for me, I love it. It is equitable. Fits sort of the mission of this tax, but I also really think it will help support that idea of having that go through again, which I know personally, and I think a lot of us, we'd like that to have another round, so.
Thank you, Counselor Hensley. Counselor Jan Vehil.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Hensley, those are great comments. I like how it does address equity issues. I really like your idea of putting, especially in the red, right? Where it's like, I look at 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, Ward 4, that would be, I would recommend we go there first. If we're not going to address the no sidewalks in some of other parts of town, I would think that would be a good spot to go first because, well, and then, I like your idea of putting up signs that say this was funded by your sales tax. The only concern I have is what about the folks for the last 15, 20 years who have had to, who have bought into this program, have paid for half of their replaced sidewalk? We might get some kickback from them.
And this is partly why we wanted to come to you at this juncture. So everyone up to this point who's participated was doing so because they wanted to, type of thing. It was 100% voluntary. Once we start sending out letters saying you have to do this, it becomes less voluntary. And I would think individuals who are doing it at that point in time would have felt like, hey, you did a bait and switch. So we technically haven't done the non-voluntary yet. It's been 100% voluntary up to this point. Would you agree, Harry?
Yeah, I think the only feedback that we've gotten as far as people who have replaced sidewalks are those that were coming in and replacing the sidewalks along with the road system. They're like, hey, I just replaced this 5 years ago. It's still in good shape. Why can't I keep it? And usually it's an elevation issue, trying to get things to line back up. So that's the only feedback I've ever received. But yeah, it's been 100% voluntary.
But that is why we wanted to come now before, because otherwise we have to start the enforcement side of it. And I would say anyone who participates from an enforcement side would feel kind of like, hey, I had to do this. And if we changed it 3 years from now, they would feel a little differently, I would think.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Cribbs, Councilor Dominguez, and Councilor Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I'm reading, and I'm just asking for clarification, the choices are, I'm very loud, I'm sorry. The choices are, we pay for it completely and start targeting areas that need it the most, or we keep it voluntary and people can, or with the letters, and people can do the half and half. Can we do a combination? Can we put a small percentage of that funding to one side for those that aren't being focused on for red? And they say, hey, I still want to do it, but it's not my turn for another couple of years, but.
So council can give that direction if that's what you guys want, but the 5 to 7 is based on this fund going towards it. So it will extend out how long we're going to be able to get to the repairs of the sidewalk. The voluntary, I think, kind of to a certain degree went away when council gave their last direction, which was send these letters, notify them that they need to get it fixed and that type of thing. So, So the concept of voluntary for the most part went away, but if council wanted us to carve out a little bit, it just is going to extend. It's going to extend how long it will take for us to get these fixed. Harry, were you getting ready to say something?
So I don't think it's necessarily a funding issue. I think the 100,000 that's identified will far exceed what the amount of work that we'll be able to capture in a 1 year, because we're only paying just for concrete now, and it'll be more than what we could actually place with a crew. So I don't know, maybe it's a hybrid. If somebody has a contractor who wants to voluntarily do this, that the city would, fund part of it in that way. Because really running the numbers, we're probably going to use maybe 50 to 60,000 out of the 100,000 if we have a good year. So that'll leave some balance, but it's just if we're going to attack this and try to go through it systematically, we can't pull off really and go do, individuals and be productive.
Okay.
So it sounds like that there's funding if we wanted to use some of that, but they would need to be doing their own contractual work.
Okay.
Type of thing.
And if we do that, I'm fine putting a cap on that funding as well. If they're doing their own work and bringing in their own contractor, the city will pay not necessarily 50%, but up to a certain monetary amount just to keep it consistent through contractors, so to speak. But thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you, Councilor Cribbs, Councilor Dominguez, Councilor Carson, and then Councilor Jackie V. Hill.
Mayor, what if there's cottonwoods in the way? Like I know some of these sidewalks, there's huge, either they're still alive or they've been cut, but the root system, I'm assuming, is still pushing up on the concrete. Is that included in the removal?
So we bought several new chainsaws. Heather loves me when I talk about cutting down trees. No, what we'll do is we'll pull the stones. We bought a stump grinder
Oh,
a
okay.
few years ago and we'll take and mill the top of that root
Mhm.
down that's pushing it up. And then we'll put the sidewalk back over the top of it. So that's kind of the balance of how do we figure out how much we can do? Because some of it, you just pull out a stone and you replace the stone. Others, you've got to do a lot of treatment to the tree roots, hand digging, kind of shoveling, working around it. But yeah, we'll be conscious of the trees and the roots and stuff best we can. They will heave back up. It's just the nature of having a tree. So but I think the trees are more important in replacing sidewalks every 10 or 15 years versus killing the tree.
Okay. And the other thing is in our, we have goals and objectives for Shooting Stars Cultural and Leadership Center in our report that we did that Heather has. And in some of that, we, are tasked to partner with the municipality. So if it's information that you need to get in this area, I'm sure we can put a little program together that meets our goals and objectives to help you to talk to people to let them know if it's the information. So.
Okay, no, that'd be great. Councilor Vihil, you'd mentioned about a great place to start. I think that's kind of where we're focusing. One of the things we really want to start with is kind of the downtown tripping hazards all up and down Main Street. Some of those ADA ramps that are deteriorated, kind of focus on that early before tourist season really gets started. And then we'll kind of move towards the south side is kind of what we're thinking. Yep.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to mention, because it was brought up from some areas not having sidewalks. What we're thinking is when we do gear back up to look at an extension of the sales tax is to have the committee review if they think that's a priority to go in and either put in missing sidewalks everywhere or over a certain amount of time, or if there's some key linkages from a neighborhood perspective and all of that. But that's a clear equity issue as well. So I just wanted to mention that since the area of no sidewalks was brought up.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Carson, then Councilor Jackie Vihil.
Okay, I just had a question. So if somebody doesn't have a sidewalk, can they get a sidewalk? So I'm just basically thinking about, on our block, there's people's yards that go all the way to the street and there is no sidewalk. And I notice people will walk through yards.
So I think the key here is from a liability perspective, if there's not a sidewalk, then the city's not liable for any tripping type of situation. And so we need to have a program that is fixing the current sidewalks. The way Harry was answering Councilor Krebs' question, though, I would imagine if someone is interested in doing a cost share to put in a sidewalk, then there might be funding available for that. Would you interpret it that way, Harry?
I think so. I think it could be either or. And just off the top of my head, maybe we set off $25,000 for those who are, want to either install sidewalks or repair some damaged sidewalk in front of their house. Monetary amount, maybe $500. It just depends. We got to figure kind of that out, or council could give better direction on what a cap could be. But infill is something we know we need, but the program's never been intended for infill.
I was just wondering if there was an option for people.
Is your mic on? I'm just asking for the Zoom.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering if there was an option for people that, maybe wanted sidewalks. The rest of the block has them, but this one property doesn't,
There's a lot of missing teeth out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Jackie Vihil. Councilor Carson?
Thank you for talking about the stump grinder and grinding it down, because that's what I was going to do to level it and replace it. And I wasn't sure about the health. I think you're right, though. Those elms are pretty resilient. You know what I mean? So I guess this is a kind of a legal question. I'm in conversations with the railroad through the COG and through talking just to one of the managers about the crossings, the railroad crossings. And the ones on the highway that are within city limits, I know CDOT does have to be involved, but technically, like in town, is there a way, so because you talked about 50 to 60,000 of that 100, is there a way to use any of that money for concrete in those crossings?
I feel like that's a bigger deviation from the sidewalk concrete program and is more of a street. I also know
Well, I'm thinking concrete replacement, so I was, like I said, it's a technical question, so since it's concrete money, is that something doable? And I'm just putting this out there for council. I think this new owner's much more willing to work with council in the city in the respects of fixing these crossings, so just putting that out there, but I didn't know if that was something.
I would
put
want to
on your
open
radar.
up the resolution, that was the street sales tax to see if it talked concrete replacement or if it has the language of sidewalk. But I know for most people who were hearing that, and as we presented, it was the existing kind of sidewalk
No, and I got you,
replacement
but
program.
We had to pay for the concrete is what we had to pay for, right? In that, when we fixed that other one?
Yeah, off of State Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of the project. Keep in mind, I think the rest of the crossings, especially the ones on 285, they're all in the county.
Mhm.
All those crossings are county.
So the one by the jail and the ones in town, right by on 8th Street aren't city? Those are city.
The one by the jails in the county.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that then. I'm sorry for that deviation. I thought the ones in town too, like on 8th Street, but I get it. I understand what it is. That's why I said it's a technical question. I didn't know if that money was able to be used for that.
Okay, looks like we have probably about 4 minutes before we have to start regular council meeting. Do you need guidance at this time or consensus? What is it that you all need?
Well, if I were to summarize, I think Counselor Hensley and Counselor Vigil were very much in favor of the recommended change. It sounded like Counselor Krebs is in favor when we have that bit of a carve out for the match type of thing. I'm not sure I'm clear with Counselor Carson, Vigil, and Dominguez, or yourself, Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in favor with the recommendation, more so because of the equity issue and the liability. Those two are very crucial. And I think as long as we identify those areas of the greater risk, like the downtown, and also some of the areas that Counselor Vigil pointed out, along with what Counselor Hensley mentioned, the signage, I think that is so important so people can see exactly where these tax dollars are going.
Can we, so if there's areas that make sense to do signage versus like if it's just 2 squares, but I think the recommendation of making sure the property owners know how this is being done is very much in agreement with what we were thinking.
Yeah, I think, I know to you all, it probably don't seem like a big deal, but to the people in the community, when they see that signage and they see that it may be two slots, but those are two plots that haven't been touched in years, that means a lot. That's showing that the city is doing something in that community. To me, I think is important, but I don't want to be the only one who say that. I want everybody else to chime in and get your thoughts.
Mayor, if I could just back you up on that, like, if you look at, if you were to put a sign on State at 7th, just one sign on State on 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, that's 4 or 5 signs to say the sidewalks on 7th are being done with the stuff like that.
So again, if there's places that would be like that, it's just, we're starting to talk cost, design, staff time to implement it when we've already got a busy street crew. There's just a lot of considerations around signage, and then where do you put it, and people dismiss it. But I'm not saying we don't like it. I'm just saying there's a lot more to it than putting up a lot of signs, is all I'm saying.
Okay, Councilor Hensley.
I'm just gonna respond to this. So I think what I would say is personally, is sort of you using your sort of that thought process, that balance. Cause I think also if you have a sign on every street, it gets to be a little much anyway. But I just more wanted that, I guess my thought was just that there is that thought as people drive by and they say, oh, look at all these sidewalks. So it's not, and maybe something saying all sidewalks from this point forward, or again, using the right language, are being done through this fund. That way then people say, oh, look, that sidewalk got done, but we saw that sign, so we know where it's coming from. So I agree with you. I don't think it needs to be everywhere, but just so there's some, and then they'll definitely a letter going to everybody, whether it's the water bill or whatever.
Okay, thank you. And then we had 3 lights I didn't see. We got about a minute, you all, so.
For me, I'm in agreement with what you guys need to do. If you're gonna work in the sign program, I mean, that probably doesn't have to happen now, I don't think, if you're gonna start working it in, but you know, as long as we're within the legal bounds of that trust fund and the resolution, I'm fine with staff's recommendation. That's what I'm saying, as far as that, the concrete goes. So.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Vigil.
I'm in agreement with it also.
Okay.
I'm in
Councilor
agreement
Lee.
too. And like I said, if you need to utilize us to help get information out, we could do that too.
All right, good job, everybody. Good timing. Anything else?